It was one of those mornings when everything in the hospital felt louder than usual. The ringing phones, the sound of footsteps rushing across the hallway, the soft beeping from machines behind closed doors. Everything blended into a kind of controlled chaos. The reception area was packed. People were waiting for checkups, others holding prescription slips, a few looking lost as they searched for the right department. It was the start of another busy week at St. Mary's General Hospital. Behind the front desk stood a nurse named Clara. She had been on her feet since 7 a.m., juggling patient forms, answering calls, and trying to calm people who were growing impatient. Her blonde hair was tied in a tight bun, and the faint lines of exhaustion showed around her eyes. She wasn't a bad person, just overworked and stretched thin. The morning rush always made her anxious, and when that happened, she tended to make quick judgments without thinking too deeply. The automatic doors slid open, and a woman walked in quietly. She moved with calm confidence, but her eyes observed everything around her. The patients, the nurses, the staff hurrying past. She was dressed neatly in a navy blue suit and carried a slim folder in her hand. Her name was Dr. Vanessa Hughes. Most people at the hospital had heard her name in meetings or emails, but very few actually knew her face. She had recently been appointed as the new medical director, a position she had earned after years of experience in medicine and administration. She had spent the last few weeks traveling to different health centers, learning how each branch of the hospital operated. Today she decided to stop by St. Mary's, quietly and unannounced, to see things from the ground level. She wanted to observe how patients were treated and how staff interacted with them when no one from upper management was watching. Vanessa didn't look like the image people often pictured when they thought of a hospital director. She wasn't wearing a doctor's coat or carrying a clipboard. She didn't have an assistant following her or a name badge with a shiny title. She was simply dressed, her natural hair tied back neatly, and her expression calm but curious. She believed in seeing things for herself, not from behind an office desk, but where the real action happened. She joined the line at the reception desk and waited patiently as Clara handled the crowd. A man in front of her argued about an appointment that wasn't showing up in the system. Another woman needed help filling out an insurance form. Clara did her best to manage it all, but she was clearly losing patience. Every few seconds she glanced at the clock on the wall as if wishing the hours would pass faster. When it was finally Vanessa's turn, she stepped forward with a polite smile. "Good morning," she said softly. "I'd like to speak to someone about the patient services here." Clara didn't look up right away. She was typing something on her computer, her mind halfway between tasks. "What's the issue, ma'am?" she asked in a flat tone. "There's no issue," Vanessa replied. "I just wanted to speak with someone from administration." That's when Clara finally looked up, and her expression shifted slightly. In her tired mind, she made an assumption almost instantly. The woman in front of her didn't look like someone from administration. She wasn't wearing a staff badge, and she wasn't dressed like a doctor or nurse on duty. She looked like a visitor, maybe, or a patient's family member. Clara's tone grew a little colder without her even realizing it. "Ma'am, if you need to talk about patient services, you'll have to go through the clinic downtown," she said. "We don't handle those kinds of walk-in requests here." Vanessa blinked, still smiling politely. "Oh, I see," she said. "I was under the impression this hospital—" Clara cut her off before she could finish. "Yes, but this area is for check-ins and patient information. If you're not here for an appointment, you can't just come in and ask for someone from admin. They don't see people without prior approval." A few people waiting nearby glanced at them, sensing tension. Vanessa didn't raise her voice or argue. Instead, she nodded calmly and said, "I understand. Could you please tell me who I might contact to arrange a meeting?" Clara sighed. She wasn't trying to be rude, but she felt pressure from all sides. The phones ringing, a doctor waiting for lab results, patients tapping their feet. She just wanted to move things along. "Ma'am, I already told you. This isn't the place for that. Please go to the clinic down the street or check our website." She gestured toward the door. Her tone was firm, final, the kind of tone that said, "Please don't make my day harder than it already is." Vanessa stood there for a moment, looking at her quietly. She could have easily corrected her. She could have pulled out her ID, told her name, and watched Clara's face turn red with embarrassment. But that wasn't Vanessa's way. She had seen moments like this too many times in her life. Moments where people judged others based on appearance, not knowing who they really were. Instead of getting defensive, she simply said, "Thank you for your help," and stepped aside. Clara went back to typing, not giving the moment another thought. She didn't notice the curious glances from a few nearby nurses who had caught a glimpse of Vanessa's calm demeanor. There was something about her, a quiet authority that didn't need words. Even standing near the exit, she looked composed, as if she belonged there more than anyone else. Vanessa took a seat in one of the chairs near the waiting area. A little boy coughed softly beside his mother, who looked tired and worried. Across the room, an elderly man tried to fill out a form but seemed confused about what to write. Vanessa's eyes softened as she watched them. These were the people she had dedicated her life to helping, those who came seeking care, comfort, and compassion. And right now, she could see how much the system still needed work. She took a small notebook from her folder and began writing quietly. Not complaints, but observations. The reception desk was understaffed. The signage wasn't clear for new patients. The waiting area was overcrowded. And the frontline staff, like Clara, seemed burned out and frustrated, which affected how they treated people. Vanessa didn't take it personally. She saw it as a symptom of a much bigger problem in healthcare, one that she had promised herself she would help fix. As she wrote, a janitor pushing a cleaning cart passed by and paused. "You waiting for someone, ma'am?" he asked kindly. "Yes," Vanessa said with a gentle smile. "Just taking a look around." He nodded. "Busy morning? It's always like this on Mondays." Vanessa smiled again. "I can see that. You've got a lot of work here." The janitor chuckled. "Yeah, but it's not so bad. Most people are nice, except when they're sick or stressed. Can't blame them." His kindness reminded her that compassion wasn't limited to titles or positions. Sometimes the people with the hardest jobs showed the most heart. As he walked away, she made another note in her book. Frontline empathy is key, but staff need support too. Back at the counter, Clara was now dealing with a frustrated mother whose child had a fever. The system wasn't pulling up their insurance information, and the mother's voice grew louder by the minute. "I called yesterday," she said. "They told me it was fine." "I understand, ma'am," Clara replied tightly, typing as fast as she could. "But the system isn't showing your file. I can't do anything until—" "You're telling me I have to wait while my son's burning up?" The mother interrupted, tears forming in her eyes. Vanessa's heart ached at the scene. She knew Clara wasn't being cruel, she was just overwhelmed. Still, this was exactly the kind of moment that made patients feel unseen. Vanessa closed her notebook and stood up. She walked back to the desk, standing quietly behind the mother until the conversation ended. When the mother finally sat down, still upset, Vanessa gently approached Clara again. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Would you mind if I spoke to someone from the operations team? I promise I won't take much of your time." Clara's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I already told you." Before she could finish, a voice came from behind them. "Is there a problem here?" Both women turned. It was one of the senior doctors, Dr. Allen, who had just walked into the lobby. He was holding a file and looked puzzled as he noticed Vanessa standing there. Then his eyes widened slightly in recognition. "Dr. Hughes?" he said in surprise. "You're back early." The sound of his voice froze Clara in place. She looked from him to Vanessa, her face draining of color. "Dr. Hughes," the name echoed in her head. The woman she had just tried to send away was the new hospital director? Vanessa smiled politely, but her tone was calm as ever. "Good morning, Dr. Allen. Yes, I came by a little earlier than planned. I wanted to see how things were going." Clara's hands trembled slightly as she stood there. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. All the assumptions she had made, all the quick judgments, flashed before her eyes. She felt her chest tighten with embarrassment. Vanessa didn't look angry. She didn't raise her voice or demand an apology. She simply turned to Clara and said, "Thank you for your time. I appreciate how busy it is this morning." Then she nodded to Dr. Allen and followed him down the hallway, leaving Clara standing behind the desk, stunned. The nurse's face turned pale as she realized what had just happened. The woman she had dismissed so easily, the one she had told to go to a clinic down the street, was her new boss, the director of the entire hospital. The lobby grew quieter after they left. A few people had overheard the exchange, whispering softly among themselves. Clara took a deep breath and tried to focus on her computer, but her hands were shaking too much to type. Her mind replayed the moment over and over again, the way Vanessa had smiled so calmly, the kindness in her voice despite the way she'd been treated. She suddenly felt a heavy weight in her chest, guilt, shame, and realization all at once. She hadn't meant to be disrespectful, but she knew that didn't excuse her behavior. For the first time that morning, she stopped rushing. She looked around at the faces in the waiting area, the tired mothers, the anxious patients, the elderly man still struggling with his form, and something in her shifted. That was the moment the story began to change, not just for her, but for everyone in that hospital, because sometimes it only takes one quiet act of grace to open someone's eyes to what truly matters. When Vanessa followed Dr. Allen down the hallway, the sound of her heels echoed against the polished floor. The hospital always had that distinct smell, a mix of antiseptic and coffee, and she found comfort in it. She had spent most of her life in hospitals, not as a patient, but as someone who understood the heartbeat of the place. To her, every sound, every hurried footstep, every quiet sigh from a nurse told a story about how well things were running, and right now, she could sense that something wasn't right. Dr. Allen walked beside her, still looking a little embarrassed that she had been standing at the front desk unrecognized. "We weren't expecting you so soon, Dr. Hughes," he said. "I would have prepared a proper welcome if I'd known." Vanessa smiled kindly. "I didn't come for a welcome, doctor. I came to see things as they are and not as they look on paper." He nodded, understanding. "I see. Well, you've certainly picked a busy morning." "That's exactly why I came," she said softly. "You can tell a lot about a hospital by how it handles its busiest hours." As they turned the corner, a nurse rushed past them, nearly bumping into Vanessa. She stopped for a brief second, muttered a quick sorry, and kept running. Vanessa smiled at her, not in disapproval but with quiet empathy. She knew that rush well. It was the rush of someone trying to do too much with too little help. They reached the small administrative office near the end of the corridor. The walls were lined with bulletin boards filled with memos, shift schedules, and motivational posters about teamwork. Vanessa looked at them closely. The words "patient first" were printed in big, bold letters on one of the posters. But something about the atmosphere told her that message wasn't reaching everyone the way it should. Dr. Allen gestured to a chair. "Please have a seat. Can I get you some coffee?" "No, thank you," she said. "I just want to talk a bit about how things have been lately. How's morale among the staff?" He hesitated before answering. "Honestly, it's been a little rough. We've had staff shortages, long hours, and the front desk gets hit hardest. Clara, the nurse you spoke with, she's been covering extra shifts for weeks. She's good at her job, but she's exhausted." Vanessa nodded slowly. "I could see that. She's efficient, but she's stretched thin." "She's not the only one," he added. "The workload has doubled since last month. Some staff take out their stress in the wrong ways. It's not ideal, but we're doing our best." Vanessa leaned back slightly, her expression thoughtful. "I don't doubt that. But sometimes the best we can do still isn't enough if people feel unseen or unsupported. That nurse, Clara, she reminded me of so many I've met. Smart, capable, but overwhelmed to the point of forgetting the human part of the job." Dr. Allen gave a small sigh. "That's true. It's not just her. Everyone's walking around like they're on autopilot. The burnout is real." Vanessa nodded again. "Then maybe it's time to remind everyone why they started doing this in the first place." She looked out the window beside her. Outside, a patient in a wheelchair was being helped into a car by a young orderly. The man smiled and patted the patient's shoulder before closing the door. That simple act, quiet and kind, said more about good healthcare than any meeting or policy ever could. Later that day, word had already started spreading quietly through the hospital about the woman who had been at the front desk that morning. Some staff whispered in the break room. Others sent quick messages to each other. By noon, almost everyone had heard that the new hospital director had arrived early and that she'd been mistaken for a visitor by the reception nurse. Clara tried her best to act like she didn't notice the whispers. She kept her focus on the computer screen, but inside she was spiraling. Her chest felt tight. Every time someone mentioned the director's name, she felt her stomach twist. She hadn't meant to be disrespectful, she truly hadn't. She was just tired, stressed, and trying to manage the chaos. But still, she couldn't stop replaying the way she had spoken to Vanessa. The firmness in her voice, the dismissive tone, and the calm, kind way Vanessa had responded, that kindness hurt more than anger ever could. When her shift ended, Clara sat in the empty break room for a few minutes before leaving. The coffee machine hummed quietly in the background. She stared at her reflection in the metal surface of the fridge, eyes tired, shoulders slumped. "What did I do?" she whispered under her breath. She knew she had to apologize, but she also feared what would happen next. Would she lose her job? Would the new director think she was unfit for her role? She didn't know, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had failed, not just professionally, but personally. Meanwhile, Vanessa walked through different departments, quietly observing. She greeted doctors, nurses, and even custodial staff with the same respect. She asked gentle questions: how their shifts were, what challenges they faced, what they wished could be improved. People were surprised at how approachable she was. They weren't used to someone from upper management actually listening. In the pediatric ward, she watched a nurse comfort a crying child by singing softly. In radiology, she noticed a technician working long past his break, determined to finish a patient's scan. Every moment told her more about the people behind the walls of titles and job descriptions. As she moved through the hospital, she thought again about the front desk. She didn't hold anger toward Clara. If anything, she saw her as a reflection of a larger problem, a system that asked too much from people and gave them too little time to breathe. By late afternoon, she called for a brief meeting with the senior staff. Dr. Allen, the head nurse, and a few others gathered in the small conference room. The air felt tense. No one quite knew what to expect. "Thank you all for coming," Vanessa began softly. "I know you've all heard that I arrived earlier than planned. I didn't come to catch anyone off guard or to evaluate anyone unfairly. I came because I wanted to see this hospital the way patients see it, the way our staff experience it when no one's looking." The room stayed quiet. Some people shifted in their seats. "I spent a few hours observing," she continued, "and what I saw wasn't failure, it was fatigue. I saw people who cared deeply about their work, but who are running on empty. I saw dedication, but also frustration. And that's not because anyone here lacks skill or passion. It's because the system around them is broken in small but meaningful ways." Dr. Allen nodded quietly. Others listened, eyes down. "I don't want to start my time here by pointing fingers," Vanessa said. "That's not how change happens. But I do want to start a conversation about how we treat people, not just patients, but each other. Every person who walks into this hospital, whether they're sick, scared, or simply tired, deserves kindness. That includes our own staff." Her voice was calm, but it carried weight. "This morning, something happened at the front desk that reminded me of how easy it is to misjudge someone based on appearances. I wasn't upset, but it showed me something important: how rushed and pressured our staff feel, how quick we can be to assume rather than ask. That's something we can all learn from." No one spoke, but the message sank deep. The staff members in that room felt both seen and slightly exposed. After the meeting ended, Vanessa stayed behind for a moment, gathering her notes. Dr. Allen lingered near the door. "That was handled beautifully," he said. "You didn't shame anyone, but I think everyone got the message." Vanessa smiled faintly. That was the goal. Change never starts with blame. It starts with understanding. As the evening lights dimmed, Clara found herself standing near the elevator, her bag slung over her shoulder. She hesitated when she saw Vanessa walking toward her. Her heart raced. This was the moment she had been dreading. "Dr. Hughes," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Vanessa turned toward her and smiled gently. "Yes, I wanted to say I'm sorry for earlier," Clara began, her voice trembling. "I didn't realize who you were. That's no excuse, I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. I was stressed, but that doesn't make it right." Vanessa listened quietly, not interrupting. "I wasn't trying to be rude," Clara went on. "I just thought you were another walk-in trying to skip the process. We get a lot of people who do that, and sometimes it gets hard to keep up. But I realize now that I made a mistake, not because of your position, but because no one deserves to be treated that way." Vanessa placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "And you're right, no one does. But I also understand how difficult your job is. I saw how busy it was this morning. You're doing your best with what you've been given. My goal isn't to punish anyone. It's to make sure no one here has to work under that much stress again. Tears welled in Clara's eyes, not from fear, but from relief. Thank you, she whispered. Vanessa smiled. Let's work together to make things better, shall we? Clara nodded quickly. Yes, absolutely. As Vanessa walked away, Clara stood there, feeling lighter than she had all day. The guilt she'd been carrying slowly began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination to do better, not just for herself, but for everyone who walked through those doors. That night, as the hospital quieted down and the night shift took over, Clara sat at her desk and thought about everything that had happened. She thought about the woman she had dismissed and how that same woman had shown her grace instead of anger. She thought about the patients she saw every day, the ones she sometimes rushed past because there were too many and not enough time. And she made herself a promise. From that moment on, she would start every shift with the same thought. Treat each person like they matter because they do. It wasn't a grand plan or a policy change, but it was a start. And sometimes that's how real change begins. Quietly, one person at a time. The next morning, the hospital felt different. The air wasn't any less busy. The phones still rang and people still rushed through the halls. But there was a quiet awareness in the air. It was as if everyone had heard a whisper, something that reminded them to slow down just a little, to look people in the eyes, to listen before reacting. Clara arrived early that day, earlier than she usually did. The moment she stepped through the glass doors, she paused and took a slow breath. She looked around the reception area that had felt like a battlefield the morning before. The same chairs, the same computer screens, the same people waiting for care. But to her, it wasn't just another Monday anymore. It was a chance to do things right. She walked to the front desk, set her bag down, and took a moment before logging in. The janitor passed by and greeted her with a friendly nod. "Morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied warmly. Even that simple exchange felt different. She realized how often she had brushed off small greetings before, too tired to respond, too focused on the next task. But now she wanted to change that. She wanted people to feel seen. By 8 a.m., the waiting area began filling up again. Patients walked in one after another, some limping, some carrying children, others holding papers and documents with worried faces. Clara greeted each person with a smile. She didn't fake it. She meant it. A woman approached the desk nervously. "Excuse me," she said, holding a folded letter. "I got this appointment notice, but I'm not sure where to go." Clara took the paper, read it carefully, and smiled. "You're in the right place," she said kindly. "You just need to check in here first, and then we'll get you to the right department." "Don't worry." The woman exhaled, visibly relieved. "Thank you," she said softly. Clara smiled again. "You're welcome. We'll take care of you." As the morning went on, the staff noticed Clara's tone had changed. She wasn't rushing people away anymore or snapping under pressure. She still worked quickly as she had to, but she was gentler, more patient. And that small shift began to ripple through the room. Patients were calmer. Even her coworkers seemed more at ease. Meanwhile, Vanessa was in her new office upstairs. She hadn't announced any big changes yet, but she was quietly working behind the scenes. On her desk were pages of handwritten notes from her first day. Observations, ideas, and reflections. She believed that fixing a hospital wasn't just about systems or money. It was about people, and people needed to feel valued. She picked up her phone and called Human Resources. "I'd like to review our staff development programs," she said. "Specifically the ones for frontline employees and nurses, receptionists, assistants. I think we can do better there." The person on the other end agreed instantly. After the call, Vanessa leaned back in her chair and thought about Clara. The image of the nurse's anxious face when she apologized stayed with her. Vanessa hadn't felt anger then, she had felt empathy. She knew what it was like to work long hours, to be misunderstood, to carry the weight of a system that didn't always appreciate its people. She had once been that nurse, years ago, before she ever dreamed of becoming a director. She had seen the same fatigue in her coworkers' eyes, heard the same sighs of exhaustion at the end of 12-hour shifts, and she had promised herself back then that if she ever got the chance to lead, she would never forget what it felt like to stand behind that desk, trying to hold it all together. Around mid-morning, she decided to take a quiet walk through the hospital again. She didn't announce her presence or bring anyone along. She liked it that way, seeing things as they truly were. When she reached the lobby, she saw Clara at the desk, handling a long line of patients with grace. There was no tension in her movements now, no sharp tone in her voice. A small boy had dropped his toy car near the counter, and Clara bent down to pick it up, handing it back with a smile. The boy's mother thanked her, and Clara replied warmly, "No problem at all. He's got good taste, and that's a fast one." Vanessa watched for a few moments from a distance, quietly smiling to herself. It was a small change, but a meaningful one. When the line cleared, Clara finally noticed Vanessa standing nearby. For a brief second, her stomach fluttered again with nerves. But Vanessa's expression was kind. She walked up and said softly, "You seem to be having a much smoother morning today." Clara smiled shyly. "I'm trying. I realized yesterday that I'd lost touch with why I started this job in the first place." "And why did you start?" Vanessa asked gently. "To help people," Clara said without hesitation. "I wanted to make patients feel cared for, not ignored. But somewhere along the line I let stress take over." Vanessa nodded slowly. "That happens to many of us. The important thing is you recognized it, and you made a change." Clara looked down for a second, then met her eyes again. "I really appreciate how you handled everything. You could have embarrassed me, but you didn't." Vanessa's eyes softened. "I don't believe in humiliating people for mistakes. The goal isn't to make you feel small, it's to help you grow. We're all here for the same reason, Clara. We want to make people better. Sometimes that includes ourselves." The words hit deep. Clara smiled gratefully. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Vanessa returned her smile. "Keep going. You're doing well." After she left, Clara stood there for a moment, replaying the conversation. It wasn't just encouragement, it was trust. And that trust lit something inside her. She felt proud again, not just of her job, but of herself. Over the next few days, word about Vanessa's leadership style spread quickly. People started talking about how approachable she was, how she took the time to listen. She didn't sit behind closed doors like some directors did. She walked the halls, visited departments, and asked real questions. In one meeting with the nursing team, she said something that stuck with everyone. "We can't heal patients if our staff are broken," she told them. "Caring goes both ways. If we want kindness in this hospital, it has to start from within." That message resonated deeply. One evening, Clara was closing up the front desk when another nurse came by. "Hey," she said with a smile. "I heard the director talked about new empathy training programs. You were part of the reason for that, you know." Clara blinked in surprise. "Me?" "Yeah," the nurse said. She mentioned that an experience at the front desk reminded her of how important kindness is. She didn't name names, but everyone knew. Clara felt her cheeks warm. "I didn't realize she took it that seriously." "She did," the nurse said. "But in a good way. I think it's going to make a real difference around here." That night, Clara walked home with a strange mix of humility and pride. She hadn't planned to become an example, but maybe that was the beauty of it. Sometimes mistakes become lessons that help others grow. Meanwhile, Vanessa was at her desk finishing up paperwork. It had been a long day, but a fulfilling one. She looked through the list of initiatives she was planning: workshops, staff support programs, and even a wellness hour for nurses to rest. Between long shifts, she wanted to build a culture where kindness wasn't treated as extra. It was expected. She looked at the small photo on her desk. An old picture of her in scrubs years ago, standing with her first hospital team. She remembered those long nights, the feeling of exhaustion, the constant rush. But she also remembered the friendships, the laughter, the small victories. She whispered softly to herself, "This is what it's all for." The next morning, Vanessa held her first official staff meeting as director. The conference room was packed. Doctors, nurses, technicians, and admin staff filled the seats. There was a mix of curiosity and nervousness in the air. Vanessa stood at the front, calm and confident. "Good morning, everyone," she began. "Before we talk about policies or schedules, I want to talk about people." The room quieted. When I arrived here, I didn't announce myself right away. I wanted to see how things worked naturally. I saw hard work, dedication, and heart, but I also saw exhaustion, frustration, and disconnect. And I realized that before we fix systems, we have to fix the way we treat each other. She paused, letting the words sink in. "Every person in this room matters," she continued. From the doctors who save lives to the janitors who keep this place clean. Every smile, every kind word, every bit of patience we show makes a difference to someone. You might not always see the results, but trust me, they matter. A quiet murmur of agreement spread through the room. So, starting next week, Vanessa said, we'll begin something new, workshops and open discussions on empathy, teamwork, and patient care. Not as a punishment, but as a chance to grow together. We'll also create better support for our staff, because kindness begins with how we treat ourselves. The room erupted in light applause. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just honest, heartfelt appreciation. After the meeting, many employees approached her personally to thank her. One said, we've needed this for a long time. Another said, it's good to have someone who understands. And for the first time in months, there was hope in the air. Later that day, as Vanessa passed by the front desk again, she saw Clara helping an elderly man fill out a form. Her patience was steady, her voice gentle. When the man smiled at her in gratitude, she smiled back like it was the most natural thing in the world. Vanessa paused for a moment, taking in the sight. The same desk, the same woman, but something had shifted, not just in Clara but in the energy of the entire place. It was no longer just a hospital. It was becoming a place of healing again, for patients and for the people who served them. And all of it had started with one small, ordinary moment, a misunderstanding that turned into a lesson, a mistake that turned into a spark of change. Because sometimes, the most powerful transformations don't begin with anger or punishment. They begin with grace, compassion, and the courage to see people, truly see them, for who they are. The following week brought a quiet but noticeable shift across St. Mary's Hospital. People seemed lighter, more aware of one another. The mood wasn't perfect. Hospitals never really are. But there was a new sense of understanding growing between staff. Something had changed. Something small yet powerful. Every morning now, Clara arrived earlier than most. She had started making it a habit to tidy up the front desk before the rush began. She organized the pens, checked the appointment lists, made sure everything was running smoothly. It wasn't just about work anymore, it was about pride. She wanted the space where patients first arrived to feel welcoming, not cold or rushed. The janitor who passed by every morning noticed the difference. You've been here before sunrise lately, he said one day, smiling. Clara laughed softly, trying to stay ahead of the chaos. Well, he said kindly, it shows. Folks at the desk look a lot calmer these days. That compliment stayed with her. It reminded her that the little things mattered. The tone of her voice, her patience, her smile. Every bit of warmth she gave out seemed to ripple through the room. Meanwhile, Vanessa had been busy behind the scenes. She'd officially launched the hospital's new Human First program, an initiative that focused on empathy, teamwork, and emotional awareness. It wasn't just another training checklist. It was real, interactive, and deeply personal. Staff members were encouraged to share stories from their own experiences, talk about burnout, and discuss how they could support one another. When she first announced it, some were skeptical. After all, hospitals were used to strict efficiency, not emotional workshops. But the way Vanessa spoke, calm, honest, grounded, made people listen. She wasn't just a director giving orders. She was someone who understood. On a Wednesday morning, the first group session took place in the conference room. The chairs were arranged in a circle, not rows. There were no PowerPoint slides, no charts, just people sitting together, sharing space. Clara was there too. She hadn't been sure about attending at first, afraid others might know about her mistake from that day, but she decided to go, hoping to learn and maybe contribute. Vanessa sat among them, not at the front like a leader, but as an equal participant. This isn't a lecture, she said softly. It's a conversation. A chance for us to remember why we chose this work and how we can support one another through it. The room was quiet for a while until one of the older nurses spoke up. Sometimes, she said, I feel like we're expected to act like machines. We treat dozens of patients every day and somewhere along the line we forget we're human too. A few people nodded. Another nurse added, it's true. When I started here, I used to sit and talk to patients. Now I barely have time to look them in the eye. It's like I'm always rushing to the next thing. Clara hesitated, but then she spoke. I know what that feels like. I made a mistake recently because I was rushing. I let my stress decide how I treated someone, and it taught me something I'll never forget. The room turned quiet again. Clara looked down for a moment before continuing. I realized that no matter how tired or busy we are, people still come here hoping to be treated with kindness. Even when it's hard, we owe them that. Vanessa listened carefully, her expression gentle. That's a very brave thing to admit, she said. And that's the kind of honesty that helps us grow. The discussion carried on for over an hour. People shared tears, laughter, and stories from years of service. One technician talked about losing a patient he'd grown close to. A receptionist spoke about how being kind to patients helped her cope with her own loneliness. By the end of the session, the air in the room felt lighter, like something unspoken had finally been released. As everyone was leaving, Vanessa called out softly, "Thank you, all of you. Change doesn't happen from the top. It starts right here, with each of you choosing compassion over frustration." That day marked the beginning of something new. In the weeks that followed, more sessions were held. Word spread fast. Staff members began encouraging one another to attend. It wasn't mandatory, but most wanted to go. The sessions gave them space to breathe, to talk, to remember the heart of their work. Clara, in particular, became one of the most active participants. She even volunteered to help coordinate the next meeting. It surprised her coworkers and even herself how passionate she had become about creating a better workplace culture. One evening, after a long day, Vanessa stayed late to finish some reports. The hospital corridors were quiet, the kind of quiet that only came after visiting hours ended. She took a slow walk down the hall, her heels clicking softly against the tile floor. As she passed the staff lounge, she heard soft laughter coming from inside. Curious, she peeked through the window. Clara and two other nurses were sitting together, eating snacks and talking. Their faces looked tired but peaceful. It wasn't anything grand, just a small moment of connection. But to Vanessa, it meant everything. She smiled and kept walking. Later that week, the hospital received a visit from a patient's family. They had come to thank the staff for the care their father received before passing away. They brought flowers and a handwritten note. In the note they wrote, "Even in his last days, your kindness made all the difference." Vanessa read it slowly, then placed it on the staff board where everyone could see. It was a reminder that no act of kindness goes unseen, even when it feels small. A few days later, Clara had an unexpected visitor at the front desk. It was Vanessa. She was holding a folder, but her tone was relaxed, almost casual. "I wanted to ask how the new changes are going," Vanessa said, "from your point of view." Clara hesitated for a second, then smiled. "Honestly, it feels like we're finally breathing again. People talk to each other more. There's less tension. Patients have noticed, too, that they've been kinder, more patient with us." "That's wonderful to hear," Vanessa said. "It's amazing how one shift in attitude can change everything around it." Clara nodded. "I think everyone just needed permission to slow down. We've all been moving so fast for so long that we forgot it's okay to care, even for ourselves." Vanessa's smile deepened. "That's exactly it." She looked around the lobby, noticing the soft chatter of patients and the calm rhythm of the staff. It wasn't perfect, hospitals never are, but it was better. It was healing. Later that afternoon, the hospital board held its monthly meeting. Vanessa presented updates on the new initiative and its early impact. She shared real feedback from staff and patients, highlighting the improvement in communication and overall morale. One of the board members asked, "Do you really think something as simple as empathy training can make that big of a difference?" Vanessa looked at him steadily. "Empathy isn't simple," she said. "It's the foundation of everything we do here. When people feel seen, they perform better, they care more, and they stay longer. This isn't about numbers, and it's about people. And people are what keep hospitals alive." There was silence for a moment, then a few quiet nods. The board approved continued funding for her program without hesitation. That evening, as Vanessa walked out of the hospital, she paused by the entrance. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and purple. Through the glass doors, she could still see the reception desk where Clara was finishing up her shift. Clara noticed her through the glass and waved. Vanessa waved back, her heart full. When she reached the parking lot, she took a moment to reflect. This hospital, like many others, had its struggles: budget cuts, long hours, human error. But now there was something stronger holding it together: understanding. A few days later, another Human First session was held. This time, instead of staff members only, patients were invited to share their experiences too. It was a bold move, but Vanessa believed it was important. One elderly man stood up and said, "I've been to a lot of hospitals and most times I felt like a number. But here lately I feel like a person again." His words made people tear up. Clara, sitting near the front, wiped her eyes quietly. That evening, after the session ended, Clara went home and sat on her balcony with a cup of tea. The city lights flickered in the distance. She thought about everything that had changed in such a short time, not just around her but inside her. She wasn't the same person who had once looked at a stranger and made assumptions. She had grown, learned, and found her purpose again. At that same moment, across town, Vanessa was in her apartment reading through her notes. She paused when she saw a small phrase she had written weeks ago in her notebook. "Frontline empathy is key, but staff need support too," she smiled. Those words had turned into something real, something alive. And even though she knew there was still so much work ahead, new systems to fix, new challenges to face, she felt hopeful. Because change wasn't just possible, it was already happening. The next morning, as the sun rose over St. Mary's Hospital, people began another day of work. The doors opened, the phones rang, and patients filled the lobby. But this time there was a warmth that lingered in the air. When a tired mother approached the desk with her child, Clara leaned forward and said gently, "Don't worry. We'll take care of you." And she meant it, every single word. Across the hall, Vanessa walked by, watching quietly, proud of the people who had embraced the spirit of what she had hoped to create. She didn't need recognition or applause. Seeing her team treat people with care was enough. As she turned toward her office, she thought to herself, sometimes it's not the biggest decisions that make the difference. It's the smallest moment. The way we speak, the way we listen, the way we care. And that truth, she believed, would stay with every person in that hospital long after the day ended. The next few months passed quietly but meaningfully at St. Mary's Hospital. There were no grand announcements or flashy signs, but something real was changing inside those walls. The hospital that had once felt rushed and distant now carried a softer rhythm. People spoke more gently. They smiled more often. Patients noticed it too. Every morning, the lobby filled with sounds that felt human again. Laughter, friendly greetings, calm voices guiding families. The change wasn't just in the tone of speech, but in the energy of the place. There was more patience, more kindness. Clara had become one of the people everyone looked up to at the front desk. She no longer worked just to get through the day. She worked to make every interaction meaningful. She learned to read faces, the fear, the confusion, the silent worries people carried when they came through those doors. And she'd make sure her first words to them offered comfort. Sometimes it was as simple as, "You're in good hands," or "Let's get you taken care of." Little things, but they mattered. One morning, a young woman came in with her elderly father. The man was weak and shivering, his hands trembling slightly as he held a worn-out jacket. The daughter looked worried, her eyes darting around as if searching for help. Clara stood up right away. "Come with me," she said softly. She got a wheelchair for the man, helped him sit, and called for assistance. The daughter thanked her again and again. Later that day, as things slowed down, Clara saw the same daughter walking out of the hospital. The woman stopped at the counter and said, "I just wanted to thank you again. You made this morning easier for us," Clara smiled. "I'm glad I could help." The woman nodded, holding back tears. "You did more than help. You cared." When she left, Clara sat back for a moment, her chest feeling warm. She realized that those were the words she used to hope someone would say about her, and now they were true. Meanwhile, in her office upstairs, Vanessa was reviewing reports. The hospital's performance numbers had improved. Fewer complaints, better patient satisfaction, and higher staff retention. But what pleased her most wasn't the numbers. It was the stories that came with them. Nurses were reporting moments of genuine gratitude from patients. Doctors mentioned how teamwork had improved. The staff lounge, once quiet and empty, was now full of chatter and shared laughter. One afternoon, she received a message from the board asking her to present the hospital's transformation story at a regional conference. It was an honor, not for the title but for what it represented. When the day came, Vanessa stood before an audience of healthcare leaders. She didn't show graphs or charts. Instead, she told them about real people, about a nurse who learned the power of empathy after making a mistake, about the janitor who reminded others that kindness shows in small actions, about the patients who noticed the difference before anyone else did. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment before applause filled it. She didn't smile for recognition. She smiled because she knew the message had reached hearts. Back at St. Mary's, life went on as usual. But one afternoon, something happened that brought everything full circle. It was a rainy Friday, and the lobby was busier than usual. People came in drenched, shaking off umbrellas, trying to stay dry. The phone rang constantly. Clara was juggling calls, paperwork, and patient questions all at once. Then, through the glass doors, a woman walked in, tired, soaked, and clearly stressed. Her clothes were damp, and she carried a small bag. She looked lost. Clara noticed her right away and motioned for her to come forward. "Hi, how can I help you?" she asked warmly. The woman hesitated, her voice trembling slightly. I think I'm in the wrong place. I was trying to find the clinic across town, but my bus broke down. I just need some help." Without thinking twice, Clara smiled. "You're not in the wrong place. You're safe here. Let's see how we can help you." She offered the woman a towel, something she kept near her desk for rainy days, and asked one of the aides to get her a cup of water. The woman looked surprised. "You don't have to do all that," she said softly. Clara shook her head. "It's okay. You deserve to be treated with care." As she helped her fill out a short form, Vanessa happened to walk by. She paused when she saw the scene. Clara was speaking gently, her tone full of patience. The woman's shoulders relaxed, her breathing slowed. It was a simple exchange. But to Vanessa, it was powerful. After the woman was helped, Vanessa walked up to the desk. Clara turned and smiled when she saw her. "You handled that beautifully," Vanessa said. "Thank you," Clara replied. "I just remembered how it feels to be treated like you don't belong. I never want anyone else to feel that way." Vanessa nodded slowly. "You've grown a lot, Clara. You turned one hard moment into something that now inspires others." Clara looked down modestly. "I just learned from the best." They both smiled, sharing a quiet understanding. Over the following weeks, Vanessa continued to observe how her staff worked. The energy had completely shifted. Even on tough days, people supported one another. When someone looked tired, a co-worker would step in. When a patient got frustrated, instead of reacting, staff responded with patience. One afternoon, the hospital organized a small appreciation event. It wasn't formal or fancy, just a chance for everyone to relax. They had snacks, soft music, and laughter filling the cafeteria. Vanessa gave a short speech, not from a stage, but standing among everyone. "I just want to say thank you," she began. "Each of you has played a part in making this hospital what it is today. It's not about titles or roles. It's about heart. The way you treat people here sets the tone for everything we stand for." She paused, her eyes landing on familiar faces, people she had seen grow, struggle, and transform. "When we first started the Human First program, I said that change begins with empathy. And today I see that it's more than a program. It's part of who we are now." Applause filled the room. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but quickly brushed them away, smiling instead. After the event ended, Vanessa found herself standing by the window, looking out at the hospital courtyard. The trees were swaying gently in the breeze. She felt proud, not of herself, but of what they had built together. A soft voice spoke beside her. "You know," Clara said, joining her, "I think this hospital finally feels alive again." Vanessa smiled. "It does. Because now people feel seen." There was a quiet pause, filled only by the sound of distant footsteps and laughter from the hallway. "Do you ever think about that day?" Clara asked suddenly. "The day I made that mistake?" Vanessa turned to her. "Sometimes. But not with anger. I think of it as the day everything began to change." Clara nodded slowly. "Me too. It still makes me think how easy it is to judge someone without knowing who they are." Vanessa looked thoughtful. "That's something the world keeps teaching us. Every person we meet carries a story we can't see, and sometimes the simplest kindness can change that story for the better." Clara smiled softly. "That's what I try to remember every day." They stood there for a while, side by side, looking out at the courtyard. The setting sun painted everything in gold. Months later, The hospital received recognition from the Regional Health Board for outstanding community care. Reporters came by asking about the secret behind their success. Vanessa gave them a simple answer. "There's no secret," she said. "It's about people. When you lead with compassion, everything else follows." The story spread, and other hospitals began reaching out to learn from their model. But for Vanessa, the true success wasn't the headlines.